So there we were, me and my spouse, soaking up the last rays of the sunset on this chill beach vacation. We've been planning this trip forever, and finally, we were living the dream. Now, let me give you the lowdown on us. Just a regular couple, living for those Insta-worthy moments? Yeah, no? The sun was doing its golden descent thing, casting that perfect warm glow on everything. I turned to my husband, Jake, and gave him the look. The one that says, babe, work your magic behind the lens. And he did. He's got this knack for capturing the moment, and he snapped a pic of me with the sun dipping low behind me. Now, it's his turn. I handed him the phone, and I'm getting ready to capture the essence of him against that breathtaking backdrop when, out of nowhere, enters Corinne. I'm trying to be cool, thinking maybe she just wants to enjoy the view or something. But no, Karen has other plans. Hey, you two lovebirds need to move. I've been waiting forever to get a shot of my precious little Jimmy over there, she says, pointing to her son who, by the way, was chasing seagulls and paying zero attention to the beautiful sunset. Now, I'm thinking, okay, lady, we're on vacation too, and we're trying to capture memories. Can you not? I tell her politely. We'll just be a sec, promise. But oh boy, Karen wasn't having it. She starts going off on a tirade about how she's been waiting for eternity and her precious moments are slipping away. I'm rolling my eyes at this point because, come on, we're talking about a kid running in circles, not a Hollywood movie shoot. I try to reason with her. Look, instead of arguing, I could snap the pic of your son and we'll be out of your hair in a jiffy. Thought I was being reasonable, but Karen wasn't having any of it. She's going on about entitlement and how people are so selfish these days. Pot calling the kettle black much? Then, out of the blue, she snatches my phone and flings it into the ocean like she's some Olympic discus thrower. I'm standing there jaw-dropped, staring at the ripples where my phone used to be. Cue the dramatic scream. Are you out of your mind? That's my phone! My husband, Jake, goes into full superhero mode, whips out his phone and dials the cops. Meanwhile, Karen is looking all smug, like she just won an epic battle for the last beachfront photo spot. The cops show up, and Karen, bless her heart, tries to spin this tale about how we were ruining her vacation and she needed justice for her stolen moments. The cop, probably having dealt with one too many entitled folks, wasn't having it. He took one look at the ocean, then at Karen, and started writing up a ticket faster than you can say Karen's gone wild. Ma'am, you just destroyed someone's property, and that's against the law. You're getting a hefty fine for this, the cop says, not batting an eye. Karen goes from smug to shocked real quick. She starts stammering, realizing that her little power move just backfired big time. Jake and I are trying to hold back our grins because seriously, who throws someone's phone into the ocean? The cop hands her the ticket and with a stern warning, lets her off. She's fuming, and we're doing our best not to burst into laughter. Morale of the story. Don't mess with people's vacation vibes and definitely don't chuck their phones into the ocean. Karma's a beach, Karen, and she just handed you a fine. This story starts about 7 or so years ago, but you'll need some background info first. After I graduated high school, I wasn't able to afford college, so I became a CNA at a nursing home. It was a bad job. Literally, I worked there for about 8 months before I left to work for a healthcare agency where I can make my own schedule and also work home care cases. Most of my patients were only allowed a home health aide temporarily while they recovered from surgery or an illness. Or sometimes their insurance would only cover a few hours a day when they really needed much more. After several months, my agency called me about a patient that was disabled and approved for 9 hours a day, every day. She was considered a permanent case as someone from the state would come twice a year to evaluate and authorize continuation of home services. I ended up working with this lady for about 2 years with the agency. She was a sweet woman, and although there was a generation gap, we got along great. She had a sister, Nancy, who was a self-proclaimed advocate for her sister and her very handicapped daughter, Jessica. I always admired her because she was dealt a bad card with having to care for not only her sister but a daughter who was unable to care for herself. We lived in New York State, and they had recently come out with this CDPAP program that would allow the family to appoint people as caregivers. They would then choose a healthcare agency to process the paychecks. It was nice because it allowed families to have more control over the care they received, and more importantly, You could get paid for taking care of your own family members. But there were limitations, one of which was that you couldn't get paid to work with your child. It had to be a sibling or some other kind of relationship. Nancy really liked me, and when she asked if I'd be willing to work with Jerry and Jessica under this program, I said heck yes. At the time, Jerry and Jessica lived in different places, but the family was able to get them Section 8 vouchers and move them to the same apartment building so the aides could do split shifts. With the amount of hours between the two of them, I was easily working a minimum of 40 hours a week. Then things changed. Nancy realized that she could get paid for literally doing nothing. The program is flawed in that the patient is approved for a certain amount of hours and all you do is fill in the sheets weekly, print a schedule of when people are supposed to work, and return them to the agency that processes the paychecks. There's no way to prove that someone is actually there taking care of the person. At first, Nancy started filling out timesheets for herself whenever there were hours left over for the week. Hours that no one worked. She could only claim these hours for Jerry, so she would fill out a timesheet for her son, saying that he worked with Jessica whenever she had leftover hours. Now, her son did actually help out from time to time, but not for all the hours she was claiming. Eventually, Nancy got greedy and started deliberately stealing hours from me and the other aides. It got so bad that she pushed us out by not scheduling us. I was struggling financially at the time, so this was devastating to me. My parents couldn't afford to send me to college, and here I was working hard so I could take a few community college classes and pay my bills. There had been some Medicaid cuts, so it wasn't like I could just find another patient. I was still technically employed at my old agency, and none of their offices had work because there just wasn't enough. Now, on to the revenge. The second I realized what Nancy was doing, I started taking pictures of the weekly schedules and everyone's timesheets. Then, once I stopped working there, I called up the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit and reported her. I explained the entire story, and for a while I didn't hear anything. Then I heard back from an investigator, and I gave him all the details he wanted. I had copies of schedules and timesheets to show that Nancy was pretending to schedule aides, but ultimately putting herself and her son on the timesheets. I also had another aide as a witness to back up all my claims. More months passed, and then I got a call saying that the CDPAP program was a gray area for them, and there wasn't much they could do because it's hard to prove cases like this, so I just let it go and forgot all about it. Then, almost 2 years ago, I got a call from the Attorney General's office, and it turns out the case was sent to another investigator and reopened. They wanted to meet with me and go over some evidence. It was over 3 years after I made the complaint, so many of the smaller details had been lost. Turns out, they had been spending the last few years building a case against the family, and they were nearly ready to go to court. And man, did they have a lot of evidence. Apparently, Nancy had forged my signature on timesheets to put hours that I had worked with Jerry under Jessica so she could claim all the hours for Jerry. Then, she was filling out timesheets for her son who wasn't working because he was away at college in a different state. She was just pocketing all the money for herself. I ended up moving across the country shortly after, so I had completely forgotten about this. Then, last week, I randomly Googled Nancy's name and had a mini freak out when I read the news articles. Turns out that Nancy and her son were arrested a year ago and charged with a few felonies each. Nancy must have taken a deal because she pleaded guilty earlier this year to one of the felonies and was ordered to pay back over $100,000 that she stole from the state. She also got 5 years probation. Not only that, but it made the local news, and it's the first thing that comes up when you Google her name, which I've changed for the purpose of this story. So this happened last year? I work for a shipping company. Boxes come out of a shipping container, get scanned into the system, and put onto a system of conveyor belts. The boxes then come down the belts to a line of workers who remove said boxes from said conveyor belts and load them into delivery trucks. I work at the end of one of these belts. This spot is special because not only do I have to load my own delivery trucks, but I also get the boxes that others missed further up the belt. I have to take these off and put them aside in a special cart for someone to put back into the system later. At the beginning of each shift, we also unload from those delivery trucks the boxes that the drivers were unable to deliver. They go on the belt, I take them off the belt and put them in the cart. Because where I am is at the end of this whole process. We have the time to do this before new boxes get fed to us. And so I have the time to take care of these missed boxes before new boxes get to me. So as you can see, my job starts at the same time as everyone else's. Then my shift was pushed back 10 minutes. You see, because I'm at the end of this whole process, upper management decided they can save some money by having me start a little bit later. After all, it takes maybe 10 minutes for the new boxes to exit the shipping containers before they would ever get to me. Because their logic is sound, and because the system logs what my start time is, and because I do not start getting paid for my time until then, I decided to wait 10 minutes later than everyone else before doing any work. I warned my belt supervisor that I'm doing this, not that he can do anything about it, or had any decision in changing my start time. So now, when the shift begins, several dozen packages begin piling up at the end of the belt. These are often ridiculously heavy packages and crumbling boxes which the drivers left behind because they didn't want to deal with them. My supervisor has to get someone else who is on the clock to deal with these packages, which annoys them. The guy who moves the special cart to deposit these boxes back into the system is annoyed because he's accustomed to it being ready about 10 minutes after the shift begins. I'm annoyed because I have to deal with this pileup of boxes before I can begin dealing with the new ones coming down the belt. My supervisor is annoyed because this distraction at the end of the belt prevents them from doing other parts of the job until it's dealt with. The managers are annoyed because I'm just sitting for 10 minutes before I'm able to fix this mess. This lasted for about 2 weeks before I noticed my start time was now the same as everyone else's. I'm a female that works in IT and has done so for over 15 years at this point. I've done everything from Tier 1 support to server management, and at one point was the IT manager for a company for many years. Needless to say, I'm pretty well versed in computers and troubleshooting. I'd moved states and just started out at a new company, only been there a few weeks. A ticket came in for someone that basically said my computer isn't working, so I walked over to their desk to see what was going on. Being new, I'm very sweet, and I guess to some people it means I'm an idiot. The guy, I later learned, was in his 50s, and we'll call him Jack, angrily asked who I was and where was former technician. I explained he was no longer there and I was a new tech. He then asked for 2 other people who were both busy and finally just said, "I'll just wait till they're done." Now, I understand there are some people who just prefer to work with specific others, and that's fine, but this was not the case. I said, "Okay, no problem, I'll let them know, and they can help when they're available." Being fairly new, I didn't want to make a big issue of it, so I just let them both know he had asked for either of them specifically. Tom, Tech 1, just rolled his eyes and said, "Then he can wait." Bill, Teach 2, kind of chuckled and said, "That's fine, I'll go over there this afternoon." For the next few hours, we were sharing stories of ridiculous tickets we've gotten in our careers and some of the jerks we've had to deal with. About 4 hours later, Bill decides to head over to Jack's desk to see what the issue was. He started complaining about his monitor flickering and going black every few minutes and how he hasn't been able to get any work done all day because we took so long to respond, and now he's going to be late submitting his project that was due today. Bill fiddles with a few things and after about 30 minutes calls us up and specifically asks for me to come over. I get there and he explains what he saw and everything he checked so far but still couldn't get it working. "No problem, let me have a look." Within 20 seconds I figured out the issue and within 5 minutes the issue was resolved. Jack just gave me a solemn thanks afterwards. Bill made a big show of how I was such an awesome addition to their team and he was so glad I got hired there. It felt good. We walked away and secretly, I knew Bill knew how to fix it and it was all for show, but still, I have an amazing team. I've not had a problem with anyone else in the company, other than the normal most people hate IT regardless. For anyone wondering, it was a driver update.